Welcome to the Under 8 Podcast, a daily college basketball show brought to you every weekday in under 8 minutes. At the time of recording, it is Wednesday, December 20th at 11:27 p.m. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, North Carolina and Duke each get wins. On Wednesday night, Donovan Clingan suffers an injury and UConn's lost to Seton Hall, and more interesting outcomes in the Big East. It's all right now on the Under 8 Podcast. Number 7, Oklahoma took its talents and its undefeated record, Josh, to the Jumpman Invitational to take on North Carolina. The now 8-3, number 11 North Carolina Tar Heels, 81-69. Hubert Davis's squad gets a win, mainly on the back of RJ Davis's 23-5-4, 7 of 18 from the field. I think if you asked most people, Josh, the Tar Heels a roster that is more talented than Oklahoma's, and that just is kind of the way that it felt for a lot of this game, that North Carolina was the best team that Oklahoma had played this season and was just a little too much for them to handle.
Yeah. You going back looking at the schedule, they did have that impressive win over Providence, which all of a sudden looks pretty good. But that was the only top 40 Ken Pom game when I checked a few minutes ago. Yeah, it's your Iowas of the world. So this was Oklahoma's first real big test. And when you turn the ball over like that and you feed North Carolina's transition game and RJ Davis is good, and generally speaking, everybody kind of does their job. Nobody is horribly inefficient. Everybody's scoring 10, 15 points outside of RJ Davis. You're not in your own building. It's probably not going to go so well for you.
Yeah, that's just kind of the way that it felt. I felt there were times in the second half where I thought that Oklahoma might get back into this thing, and they just couldn't string enough good possessions together on both ends of the floor. I thought UNC's defense was pretty. It left something to be desired, and that Oklahoma, when they were able to take care of the basketball, got some pretty good shots. They found themselves open on the 3-point line plenty of times. But an Oklahoma team that, when you look at their KenPom page, they do a lot of things really, really well. One of the things that they do not do well is take care of the basketball. They're outside the top 220 in the country in that category. Porter Moser's squad definitely, they play great defense. They're very efficient offensively from a ratings perspective and efficiency perspective. But the turnovers come back to bite them in this one, and just not something you can do when you're facing a Tar Heels team that has the talent that it does.
And would have liked to see a little bit more production outside of your guards in the starting lineup. That's where most of your scoring came from, which isn't inherently a bad thing. But when you have the turnovers to come with that, when the other team has Armando Bacot on the floor, has Harrison Ingram on the floor, you need a little bit more. I'm just not all that surprised by this. This is the kind of thing that happens in the AP poll when Oklahoma, does fundamentally very good basketball team. Porter Moser's doing a really good job with this group. They're gelling. Clearly a good basketball team. They didn't embarrass themselves by any means. But the question was just how high is your ceiling? And maybe it's about as high as we thought it was, which is not being typically competitive outside of your own building against top 10 teams.
Yeah, credit to them for putting together 10 straight wins, something that not a lot of teams have done, obviously, and certainly earned that spot in the top 10. But yeah, if you ask somebody to put together their top 10 organically and not based on talent and what they felt about individual teams rather than resumes, you're probably not going to find Oklahoma in very many top 10s. And that was just kind of the vibe we got from this game. Of course, the Sooners, they'll be just fine now, 10-1 on the season, get a couple of pretty easy mid-major games before they start Big 12 play after the beginning of the year. At Madison Square Garden, Josh, Duke 78, Baylor 70. Jared McCain leading all scorers with 21 points, 7 of 11 from the field, 3 of 6 from the three-point line. All 5 Duke starters in double figures. He and Caleb Foster combining for 33. Jeremy Roach adding 18 of his own. And that's a spread that we thought we'd see more of from Duke than we have so far this season.
Yeah, that's the story here. Tyrese Proctor still unavailable, so you got to add Caleb Foster to the starting lineup, and he and Jared McCain go for 33 points. Obviously, most of that was McCain, but you got between them 33 points, 12-20 shooting, plus 6 assists. And then you get what Jeremy Roach did. Ryan Young has his really good stretch of minutes with Kyle Filipowski on the bench. They did all of this while shooting 33% from 3, which you can spin that however way you want. Either they are way too reliant on Jared McCain's 3-point shooting, or this team is finding ways to win without the 3. And considering the inconsistency of some of the players and can you get enough guys contributing every game, I'm going to choose to believe in the positive part of this, that you scored 78 points against a we're going to get to the defensive part of this in a minute, but against a good basketball team without needing to shoot 40% from 3, it's a very sustainable formula for Duke if you can get these kind of performances across the board.
24-29 from the stripe doesn't hurt. That makes getting to 78 much easier. Josh, on the Baylor side of things, just 43% from the field as a team. You know, it's nothing is super terrible here when it comes to individual performances. Backcourt ball security is still very much an issue. Ray J. Dennis, 6 turnovers to his name to 4 assists. That's something we talked about when discussing the Michigan State blowout. But you know, this is a Baylor team, Josh, that does not have the elite versatility and playmakers defensively, especially. And when you have just not great nights offensively, then the margin of error is just smaller than it has been for some of the better Baylor teams of the last 5 years or so. And I feel like this is another example of just that.
Absolutely. After this game ended, a little while after that, I checked. They're 4th in offensive efficiency.
That's correct.
Fantastic.
Still the best 3-point shooting team in the country.
Sure. They are not a good basketball team if they don't play like the 4th most efficient team and the best 3-point shooting team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
There is no other way to win basketball games. And you look at the defensive, I think they were 79th or something defensively. It sticks out like a sore thumb because you got all these teams. Of course, Houston's way up there. You know, Purdue's looking pretty good defensively. Everybody's at least in the 10s or the 20s. And then there's just Baylor and one other team that has an even worse defense. And I don't remember who it is. Oh, it's Alabama.
Sure.
Just the feast or famine part of it, which they're not Alabama to that extreme. But I loved that Baylor team because it was so well balanced and so multidimensional. And at one point in one of the huddles, Scott Drew just kind of said, guys, we got to do something. He was clearly, for the second game in a row, exasperated with what is happening defensively, the lack of attention to detail. I'm to the point where I've really cooled on this team. I don't believe it gets fixed. They're going to win a lot of games because they're just that good offensively. They're that well coached. They're that talented. But with what Houston's doing, we're down to 3 undefeated teams? Ole Miss, James Madison, and Houston. Of course, everybody had that.
Just like everybody expected. Right.
With what Houston's doing, with what we know Kansas is, I don't see this as a team that can compete for a Big 12 title anymore, and I didn't necessarily feel that way a week ago.
You know, it's just like they had another really fine 3-point shooting night, but they only made 8 of them. And this is one of those things where yes, you shot 45% from the 3-point line as a team, again, 8 of 18, but they're 236th in the country in 3-point field goal rate. So it's just like sometimes I'd rather just be like the 54th best 3-point shooting team in the country, but also like the 54th team in terms of 3-point field goal rate.
Right.
It just it doesn't have as big of an impact.
Yep.
And you can still shoot it pretty well and see a nice percentage and not necessarily get the advantage that you'd like to get as a team that shoots it really well when the other team is 4 of 12 from the 3-point line. It was still a good shooting performance. It just doesn't have the impact that you maybe would think that being such a good 3-point shooting team would have.
Right. It can't win you games. It also can't lose you games. But it's all predicated on you being really good at the other stuff offensively. Because it's that added extra weapon, right? Where, oh, by the way, they could go hit 14 threes today. But I remember getting angry with some comments Seth Davis made during the NCAA tournament during Baylor's run. Because he said something when they were losing at halftime Villanova about they have to hit threes. No, they didn't. And they didn't. And they came back and they won that game because they were that good at everything. Taking care of the ball. You had 3-level scoring guards. You had 3 of them. Yeah, it's a very, very good point. And that's what separates them from Alabama, right? For better or worse, Nate Oates' team is going to shoot 25 to 33s. They're going to win or lose by the 3. Yeah, you can be a great 3-point shooting team if you don't take enough of them for it to matter and you're not doing the other stuff particularly well. It makes you an efficient team. But if you're only scoring 70 points, that is simply not enough with the way this team plays defense.
Absolutely. A couple of interesting Big East results on this Wednesday evening. We'll start at Seton Hall, where UConn falls to begin conference play. Some of the tweets out there about UConn's record over the last 20 years and opening conference games is pretty impressive. They've won more national championships in the last 20 years than first conference games. That's actually a crazy stat. Tonight is no different. Seton Hall 75, UConn 60, all 5 starters for the Pirates scoring at least 9 points, and everybody else really picking up their portion in the scoring department. But Josh, the biggest byproduct of tonight's game was Donovan Clingan, who only played 14 minutes. Was 7 of 12 from the field and had 14 points and 7 rebounds in those 14 minutes, but went down with an ankle injury. So a couple different sprained ankle, according to Dan Hurley. Didn't have much more to say than that after the game. But of course, the 15-point loss to a Seton Hall team that's been just okay to start Big East play is not awesome. But the future health of your starting center and potential All-American guy is also something to be concerned about if you're a Huskies fan.
Absolutely, yeah. They were right in this game when he got hurt. Then they weren't in the game anymore. Cam Spencer struggled, which meant they didn't have a third scorer. So by the end of the game, they were down to 1 player who had a remotely good game from the starting lineup. And it's not like Tristan Newton, by his very high standards, was spectacular. 18-0 edge and transition points for Seton Hall. Kadari Richmond has 23. Yeah, these kind of things happen. The bigger question is Donovan Clingan, like you said, and what his status is moving forward. They've got a tricky, I guess is the word I'll use, game against St. John's on Saturday. So we'll see what his status is for that. And important just fundamentally to have somebody to guard Joel Soriano. But when Marquette loses and Creighton loses at home to Villanova, 1 conference loss on the road is not as big of a deal because this conference is already cannibalizing itself.
Indeed. Certainly we learned last year that stumbles in Big East play shouldn't especially dictate how you feel about Dan Hurley's Huskies. One thing I want to point out, Josh, is that in UConn's 2 losses this year, Cam Spencer is he was 2 of 12 from the field against Kansas in their 69-65 loss. And in this game, he was 2 of 7. So if you're keeping count, that's 4 of 19 from the field in UConn's 2 losses. If there's anything I'm concerned about when it comes to UConn right now, it's that third scorer, it's that third perimeter guy outside of Tristan Newton and in a lot of situations, Alex Caravan. But whether it's Cam Spencer or Stephon Castle off the bench, there needs to be a third weapon there for UConn, because when it's not there, and of course Clingan is the story here, because they, it's at least much closer than this if Clingan plays 30 minutes in this game. But you've seen UConn struggle to get to 70 points in their 2 losses, and Cam Spencer, and really that lack of a third scorer on the perimeter, or even a second scorer, really has come back to bite them. So wherever the consistency comes from, whether it's one guy or a combination of guys, going to need that from UConn moving forward.
Yeah, and Alex Caravan is pretty consistently in the 8 to 12 range.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know what you're going to get from him, but you need somebody else who can get you 18, who can be the other spark plug, go on a 6-0 run by themselves, that kind of thing. The kind of things Jordan Hawkins could do last season.
Mm-hmm.
And Cam Spencer has proven he can do this season when everything is working well. But you don't really have somebody. Maybe that's the best way to put it. They don't have somebody to fill that role if Cam Spencer's not filling that role.
Mm.
So it is something to monitor. And yeah, to me, it is not a complete coincidence that his numbers are indicative of how this team plays.
Last thing real quick, in Omaha at the CHI Health Center, Omaha, Creighton, number 12. They got 45 minutes of action in this game, and an overtime loss to to Villanova. Only managed 66 points in a 68-66 loss. Eric Dixon, 32 points on 12 of 21 from the field. He's been there have been a couple games this year where he looks like the best player in the country just for, individual nights. He had a 34-point performance earlier in the season, but
not a good athlete according to Mick Cronin, though.
Apparently not, Mick. But another game where the Blue Jays offense just kind of lays a dud. They were 39% from the field as a team, 5 of 24 from the 3-point line. And it's officially what's going on with Creighton's offense season here, because it's happened too many times for it to just be a fluke.
Yeah. We can't. You and I both wanted to write the Colorado State game off as a very bizarre one-off, and evidently not exactly the case.
Mm-hmm.
They had their chance. I mean, first of all, they were up, 14 points in the second half?
14, I believe, yep.
Yeah, they were in control of this game. You should not, if you want to win a Big East title, you should not lose games like that at home. I don't care how experienced the other team is. I don't care what the name on their chest is. You got to win that game. It's not the end of the world because Marquette and UConn obviously also lost. I still think it comes down to those 3 teams. I'm not budging on that.
Mm-hmm.
But Baylor Schauerman misses a huge free throw. He misses as many free throws in this game as he had all season heading in. They don't shoot the 3 well. Credit to Villanova, though. That they are just going to be this confusing team that this looked more polished because it was unpolished, if that makes sense.
Not especially.
There's almost, I was more convinced by this. This looked more like gritty Villanova that finds a way to win Big East games.
Sure. Okay.
In terms of just knowing how to win and making the plays necessary. Then they shot 42% from 3 and hit 14 of them. Of course they won.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There was a very clear story being told about whether they're winning or losing basketball games. This one, they had to claw their way back in. They made the plays down the stretch. Dixon hits a huge 3 in overtime that really puts the pressure on Creighton, and they never fully recover.
Mm-hmm.
These are these are the kind of things that really boost your confidence, and maybe Villanova is turning a corner. I'm not there yet. I need to see more consistency when they don't shoot the three well, but this was a step in the right direction and an important statement to make up for some of those losses and to really keep themselves in the conversation early, because now you've got the game out of the way and you are still undefeated in Big East play.
Yeah, I mean, Eric Dixon at 32 and the rest of the team was 15 and 45. So I'm still concerned.
Right.
I mean,
but they just beat Creighton on the road doing that. That's my point.
I guess. But if you play this game 10 times, I think Creighton probably wins it 8.
8.
So,
okay. Yep.
So
absolutely.
We'll see what they compound it into throughout the rest of Big East play. My man Drew in the chat real quick. Clingan's injury. Dan Hurley after the game was very much, it's a sprained ankle. I don't know much more than that. So we'll see what that actually means. They play again on Saturday. St. John's, as I believe, is who they have next.
Yep.
So we'll see if he's a part of that. But sprained ankle is all we got from Dan Hurley after the game. Josh, anything else?
On the bright side for UConn, the women's team took a brief reprieve from the gauntlet schedule that they always play. Did you see who their opponent was today?
I did not.
Toronto Metropolitan University.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I knew this. Yeah.
I believe the score at halftime was 68-9.
That's cruel and unusual.
Yeah, unconstitutional. Absolutely. So there is something to celebrate for UConn basketball today, even on a very disappointing dark day for the men's team.
Final score of that game, Josh, I believe was 111-34.
Yeah, Fox Sports on their bottom ticker had something about tale of two Huskies. Donovan Clingan injured, women's team wins by 77.
Sure,
it was an interesting headline kind of thing. Yeah,
typical 111-34. That's the Under 8 podcast in a very brief and succinct 22 minutes and 32 seconds. Hey, sometimes there's a lot to talk about. We will not apologize for it, but that is all we have for the Under 8 podcast for Wednesday, December 20th. It is 11:49 p.m. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. Follow the Under 8 Pod on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Thanks so much for being here, and we will see you next time.